think we'll make a start. It's a couple of minutes past 2. Good afternoon. Welcome to Audit and Governance Committee. Before we start proceedings, can I just bring your attention to some housekeeping? No expected fire alarm today, so if it does sound, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit and meet at the fire assembly point in the Civic Square. Please can I ask that you keep your microphone switched off when you're not using it, but use it to address the meeting. Please ensure your mobile devices are turned to silent. And also to let you know that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and is capable of subsequent repeated viewing. And by entering the Warspite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. So item 1 is apologies. Hannah, do we have any?
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Stevens, and we've got Councillor Freeman with us today substituting, and Councillor Nicholson has asked me to pass on his apologies that he's going to be late to this meeting. He's on his way.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Councillor Freeman. Thank you for substituting today. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any, Mrs. Benny?
Just with reference to one of the audit items, I'm a non-exec director for Livewell. It should be registered, but I thought it was important to flag it given there's some discussion about Livewell in that document. All right.
Thank you. So item 3, minutes of the meetings held, first of all, 12th of November 2024. Can these be agreed as a true and accurate record, Mrs. Benny?
That particular, on the first page, I'm registered or documented as a accounts. No, hang on, which page are we on? It's November, isn't it? That's right, in the November one, but not the December one.
I'll make sure that's changed.
Yeah, and in one of the 2 sets of meeting minutes, I haven't been able to, I didn't document which one. There is reference to audit years, for example, 1920, but it's written as just 1920. So for future, I think it should be 19/20, so that for when we look back in future, we don't think we're in 1920. Yeah, because when I read it, I thought, oh, 1920. And then I clicked. So I think if we can just go through, there's variations in terms of how it's referenced. That's all. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other sort of points of accuracy or any other amendments? Okay, so that's the minutes of Tuesday the 12th of November's Audit and Governance Committee agreed. Moving on to the minutes of 11th of December 2024. Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to have inserted into those minutes, please, we had a very detailed discussion about the lateness of the papers that we received tea time the day before, our frustration and difficulties that it caused, and about delays via the auditors to Plymouth City Council. Now, given that our minutes are meant to reflect accurately what has been detailed and discussed here, I really do feel that that detailed discussion should at least be noted in those minutes, and our frustration noted in those minutes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. I agree, that's a really valid point. Councillor Finn.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on what Councillor Freeman said. I think it's a general acceptance in the room, especially by the members here, that the minutes aren't a true reflection of what was said. There's a lot missing from that. And most importantly, that we only agreed at the end, we put a caveat on there. There's no mention of that caveat at all in the minutes, because in simple terms, the members only had the copies of the papers 10 minutes before, at 10 o'clock the night before. They had no chance to peruse them, they had no chance to note them, they had no chance to digest them, therefore come and offer a proper scrutiny of the minutes. So therefore it was absolved in that meeting and agreed by all, as I believe it, because it was put to the floor, because I was chair and I made the recommendation that we'll pass it at this stage, but only on the basis of what the officers and auditors have said. It's not to say that we agree or disagree with them, because we haven't had time to read them. And that was the caveat, as I believe it. If anybody's got anything to add to that, and all that should be noted in the minutes to provide a true and accurate record.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. I noticed, oh, Hannah?
Through you, Chair, if I note that, and so rather than accept the minutes at this meeting, if I update both sets and just bring them to the next one, as there was an issue with the other one, so rather than agreeing them today, I'll make a note of those and we'll bring them back to the next committee.
Is committee happy with that? Thank you for that.
Can I just,
David?
just to add to that as well, so I absolutely take the points that have been made and we'll rectify that. There was a recommendation that you as Chair of Audit and Governance should meet with us as council officers and with our external auditors on a regular basis to make sure that we get that flow correct. So that is in recognition of that, that was not acceptable, so and I understand that's already in place, so thank you.
Freeman?
Thank you, Chair. Also, just recollecting from that last meeting, we did actually request, and committee agreed, for an audit plan to be put in place so that we don't end up being in that same situation again. Really, as a matter of rising, sort of like, where are we on that? Is that now something that's in progress? What's happening with that, please?
I have to apologise because I wasn't at the last meeting. Can you just clarify in terms of external audit plans or audit governance plans? Sorry.
So basically for finance to work alongside Grant Thornton and with the chair of A&G to put in place an audit plan, so like a timetable plan. This needs to be here by this date, this needs to happen by that date, and to make sure that those timetables are stuck to, so that we don't suddenly find there's a date at the end of this month or in February where things have to be done by, that we're not suddenly crashed with paperwork the night before where we then can't give it due diligence.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We'll obviously take that on board. I'm not wishing to deflect from what you're saying, but I think we've been through unusual times recently, and Grant Thornton would agree that it's not always in our gift to know exactly when a deadline might appear. But you're absolutely right, we do know we've got a February deadline, so we will work towards that. But I'll just reiterate that we are holding regular meetings, Chair Grant Thornton, to make sure that we don't do that again. And there is a clear timetable, just to assure you, and I'm sure we'll get an update from David when he does his item about the fact that we've got auditors physically on site now, so that makes life a lot easier. But I take your points.
Thank you. Councillor Finn?
Yeah, just to clarify what Councillor Freeman said, it's just to prevent the situation we found ourselves in last time, because there's no way, and I have the papers here, 303 pages, you can digest between 10 o'clock the night before, you don't even know it's come. So when you look at your laptop the next morning, to digest that and give proper scrutiny to the decisions this committee is meeting. And I think this is why the plan was agreed, that in future, to prevent this from happening, we don't care who's responsible, whether it's officers, Grant Thornton, whatever, we need the information to be able to digest it, understand it, formulate the relevant questions that we can bring before scrutiny so that it's properly financed.
Great, thank you. So the proposal is we just note the minutes and then they'll come back to the next audit and government meetings for approval with the amendments. Excellent. So item number 4, Chair's urgent business, of which I have none. So I'll move straight to item 5. This is an update on the capitalisation directive, and David, I believe this is over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a standing item on the agenda so that we're all aware and fully briefed on where we might find ourselves. So unfortunately, the update for today is I don't have an update, which sounds a little bit deja vu, doesn't it? But just to assure you as a committee that I am in regular contact still with MHCLG colleagues. I've got a call in this week. If your memory is as sad as mine, you will remember that kind of this time last year when we were talking about where we might be, we received a letter from the Minister dated the 2nd of February. So it seems to be that he works, or the system works to end of January, early February, which is certainly what I've been told on an email, but I want to follow up on a call just to make sure, because we need this sorted for all kinds of reasons.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible, sort of knowing the way government works, that that the Minister is holding the decision on us back because there are a number of other authorities that are all in the same boat, and they will also want to get through the local government finance statement position and all of that, and therefore we've been hooked into, and our delay is due perhaps to something bigger.
So you make a very good point. Unfortunately, they don't treat them as individual cases, and we were one of 19 that applied for exceptional financial support, even though we were recognised as being unique because we weren't asking for support. We wanted a retrospective piece of paper. But you're absolutely right. It seems to be that the way MHCLG are working and the Minister is bring 19 to me and I'll sign them off. You can be assured that I am pushing back on that and saying surely it's better to try and clear as much as you can, because as we do know, the financial climate is not improving and there are more councils now applying for support. So where would that cycle end? But I am pushing as much as I can.
Councillor Fenn?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, David, obviously we're aware that the councils took a lot of the papers have been backstopped and disclaimers issued by the auditor. That was made clear at the last meeting. How does this impact us on actually setting a budget? When we go before council, we have to set the budget. Can we set the budget without the investigation in place or not?
Thank you, Councillor Finn. So the position we find ourselves in now is replicating where we were this time last year. So I need to have conversations with Grant Thornton, but certainly the letter, the in principle letter said this should give you a paraphrase, the ability to set your budget. So part of my argument to MHCLG is I need something to rely on the next one, because I don't want Grant Thornton to say that letter's 12 months old. But as we stand at the moment, we are still legal and we have had no pushback from the auditors or from MHCLG that we cannot proceed.
Thank you. Anything further on the Capitalisation Directive update? Okay, move on to item 6. This is the report from Grant Thornton, our external auditors, on the progress. So it's a progress report and sector update. And I believe, actually, David, it's yourself, not Jackson.
No, thank you, Chair. Jackson sends his apologies, but took the view that given that I was already down here, it was probably more expedient for me to turn up rather than him drive down here. So as it says, this is a progress report. It is really, I guess it's probably more of a holding report at this point in terms of where we are in the 23-24 audit. So page 21 of the pack, 5 of the report, gives a brief outline in terms of where we are. Obviously, there were a number of lessons from the December audit committee, and accepting that, as David has said previously, it was an exceptional set of circumstances in that the chances of bringing 4 sets of accounts to one audit committee is well, it is at this stage never going to happen again. So we are only dealing with 1 set of accounts at the moment, which is 23-24. The backstop deadline for that is the 28th, so all work has to be completed by then, or the audit is again backstopped. But we are still aiming for the 18th of February, and our intention is to complete all the field work within the next couple of weeks. And to that end, as David again says, we have the team are on site now to discuss the outstanding issues which Carolyn and his team have made themselves available. So the next 3 or 4 days we are looking to break the back of it. I think also to address sort of that question about the auditor finance team, audit plan and having a very detailed timetable. I think, as I said at December, I wouldn't want members to think we sort of make this up as we go along and just sort of look at these things. We do have very regular meetings. So we hold a weekly meeting with Caroline and her team, which is informed by our up-to-date sample tracker, issues, outstanding questions, and we go through those in detail. And we also prioritise those that we anticipate will take longer to address. So then we are left with a smaller number and quote unquote easier items to deal with towards the end should the time pressures come on there. But having learnt from previous audits and sort of the delays that impacted, we have put in place elements to deal with that and to make sure that members will get those reports on a timely basis and thus avoid the late night submission as happened previously. That said, as with all of these things, these 4 days this week is probably crucial, and I think we're all aware of that within the team, and we need to make sure that we have made full use of that in order to be comfortable, because as it says here, the opinion will be disclaimed because we don't have any assurance over opening balances, as you would naturally expect, because we didn't audit 22-23. But by doing sufficient work to get assurance over the movements and some of the closing balances, that starts to rebuild that trust that the NAO are looking for within the whole process, and will allow us to move away from qualified opinions in the coming years. Alongside that, value for money, again, we continue to deliver that in the time frame that's delivered on time most times, and members will have seen that report at the last committee meeting. Page 22 has the timetable in line with what we just said and closing things out in February. And then behind that, there are a number of sector updates, which we include as a matter of course for those areas that we think members may find of interest. That was everything I was going to cover, but I'm more than happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, David. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Rainsford and then Councillor Finn.
I have a question and some clarification about the way in which leases, low value ones, are decided, because it's a judgment call. Is that based on some sort of national model, or is it sort of site specific? And the second question is, you're talking about leases of low value and looking at the value of the asset when it was new. How do you manage, for example, a very old Georgian house, which might be incredibly valuable now, but wasn't very valuable when it was new?
So that's obviously that's in relation to IFRS 16. In answer to the first one, what I will say is this is only really coming to force from the 1st of April 24. So it's a 24-25 issue. It's not something that, I wouldn't say we're obviously we're aware of it. It'd be very remiss of us to not be. But sort of some of the more detailed questions we're still sort of having a little think about. In terms of low value, that is for management to decide. As is a typical auditor answer, where we can, we push it back towards management to say that's something for you to decide. Because obviously councils differ by size. You know, Plymouth and Bristol are different. Manchester's a different size. So what is low value to Plymouth might be you know, nothing to Manchester, etc., etc. So that again is for management to decide. In terms of your second one, it's a good question and not one that I'd thought about. But it is something and I don't want to give you the wrong answer now, but if you like, I can take that away and then I'll come back. I can give a response through the chair if that's helpful.
Yes, that's very helpful, and sort of linked into this, probably a matter for the officers. Are we confident we've identified all our low value leases within the city?
I'm going to slip my shoulders over to Carolyn, who's closer to the detail on this one, but have we identified the leases
It's ongoing work for us. Sorry, through you, Chair. It's ongoing work for us at the moment. We have a workshop with Arlen Close on Friday this week to look at IFRS 16. We've also had to take into account the impact on our private finance initiative leases. So Arlen Close have undertaken work on those for us to check that the accounting model we've been using is accurate and up to date. But this is ongoing work which has been quite difficult to proceed with while we've been managing 4 financial years in addition to the current one which we're trying to close, and we are a very small team. But this is something that all local government bodies, unless they've all opted to go early, are wrestling with at the moment. So I can't say we will get it 100% in year one. We will do our best, but with the volume of leases that we have, it is quite a big task for us.
Chair, on that point, I appreciate what Carolyn is saying, that it's a long process, but could we ask officers to come back when they've completed the process and report to us?
Of course, yeah, we'll do that. I was just going to say, for the sake of anyone who's just tuned in, Arlen Close are our treasury management and financial advisors, so we work very closely with them, and hopefully I can say they're trusted by Grant Thornton, as I'll put that on record. And I think with any tasks that we have to perform, and it comes back to what David just alluded to, there will be a long list of leases, and some of them will be of higher value and more strategic than some of the smaller ones. So we'll have to work our way down the list. So to actually get right down to the bottom one is kind of, we've probably started again, but we'll certainly come back with an update.
Councillor Finn.
Yeah, David, and David, I appreciate that you haven't got these papers in front of you, but obviously these were the papers that were presented to us on the 11th of December. And there was one sort of paragraph that sort of stepped out. What it says on page 9 is of that said document, the MTFS in February 2022 shows a cumulative deficit over the next 4 years, 26-27, 118 million. However, the gap has widened significantly to 256 million in September 2022. As the MTFS 5th years has been recalculated to include 2027-28 financial year, the financial risks facing the council are significant, and given the low level of reserves, current indications are that the council's financial position is critical. Can you elaborate on that statement, and is that going to be clarified in the document you're producing on the 18th of February 25, please?
So you're probably not going to like my answer, Councillor. If I'm honest, I didn't do that report, and I wasn't involved in the workings that were done there. That was done by our VFM specialist, a lady called Jeanette Beale, in conjunction with Jackson, who is obviously not here. I can, however, take that question back to them and get a fuller response for the February committee, although David may want to say something to that as well.
If I may, Chair, just to answer that from Councillor Finn. So that was again a backward-looking review from Grant Thornton of previous years' set of accounts. I've had many conversations with Grant Thornton moving us forward. It's a public document. It went through full council as a medium-term financial strategy in November 24, which updated the position. The numbers for the next 5 years are not in that ballpark. So, for instance, at that stage, looking forward to 25-26, we were talking about an £18 million gap in that financial year, which is now, if you are interested to look at Cabinet from yesterday, there is a balanced budget proposal. So that 18 million has been squared away, and that will then have a direct impact on future years. So we've still got to do the work for the next 5 years, but it will not be in the ballpark of 118, to 200 million. It's going to be sort of multiples of 10, 15. So, and then in terms of the second part of your question, Councillor Finn, which is about the reserves, it's incumbent upon me as Section 151 officer, and you will see this when you get the full papers for February budget setting meeting. I have to write a statement that says, in my opinion, Is this robust? Are there enough reserves, etc., etc. So that forms part of that report. So.
Yes, just to clarify, David, why has it been recalculated to include till 27, 28, please?
Because we do I try to do a rolling 5-year medium-term financial plan strategy. So as 1 year closes, you move forward, which is sort of customer practice. Yeah. Which is interesting because when we go to full council, you'll be looking at 29, 30, which a lot will happen between now and then. But yeah, that's why.
Mrs. Benny?
Thank you. I found the questions on page 25 really helpful at the pack in terms of those things that we ought to be considering. And I suppose for me, the assurance would be in having those answered at the right time and coming back to committee with the answers to those questions. So I've a request for those to be answered, but obviously at a time when it's most appropriate. So when would it be good for those to come back to committee? Because I don't want people doing loads of work and finding, there's a good time and a place probably for that to come back and give us assurance that those questions have been answered, which obviously seem to be the key things that we should be seeking as a committee.
Through you, Chair. I would expect, because obviously we need to undertake all of this work for the 24-25 accounts, which will be published at the end of June, that we would come back to committee following that with those answers.
That's really helpful. So if we can maybe put it in the planner or something, so we've got a mental log, we then will have all those questions answered in with the most appropriate time then.
I could incorporate those into the report on the statement of
Fantastic.
accounts.
Really good. Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone have any further questions for David on the external audit progress? No? Okay, thank you. And thank you, David. Move on to item 7 now. This is the update on external audit recommendations. And David, I think you're giving a verbal update.
Yes, through you, Chair. Apologies that it's verbal. There seemed little point of putting a report together that said there's nothing to report. So, excuse me, I'm struggling to breathe. I do apologise. We've had reports coming through here previously which had, because of the situation that we found ourselves in with 5 open years of statement of accounts, there were a lot of recommendations and comments from the auditors. Hopefully you will agree that we brought to this committee a report that closed those down, and the comment that we got from Paul Dossett was there are 2 outstanding that are still rolling forward. So those will roll forward. From memory, it's about the sustainability, which is an ongoing issue, not just for Plymouth, but for the whole of the public sector, and about being more open and transparent, Councillor Finn, about our reserves and how robust those might be. So when we move towards the next set of accounts, there will be more recommendations coming out. I will be talking to Justine, David's colleague at Granthornton, and updating her on the budget report that was approved yesterday and what the revised MTFS is looking like. So she will start to make some comments, but it'll be sort of first draft, and then that'll proceed through the coming financial year. So that's where we find ourselves, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions on that? No? Okay, move straight to item 8, which is the Treasury Management Board update, which is also a verbal report from David.
Sorry, this is a verbal report. So again, this is a standing item that I want to keep on the agenda so that committee is fully aware of any decisions Treasury Management Board might be making that have an impact on the future of the council. We were scheduled to have a board meeting late last year, but unfortunately due to member unavailability and other items that distracted us, such as the late settlement and so on, I did call for that meeting to be postponed. So I've kept it on the agenda so that we don't lose it, and I will absolutely make sure that when we come back to the next meeting there is a full written report that you can have a look at in terms of our Treasury management activity. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions for David on that? Councillor Freeman?
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. On page 34. So under the executive summary, the second page of the report that you've got in, it says about, it was noted that the income recovery team is due.
Sorry, you've leapt on though.
You're on a different agenda.
You're on
item.
agenda
I'm on the
now.
wrong one. I'm sorry.
We're not
It's
quite
just a
there yet,
verbal
Councillor
one.
Clifford.
Speeding us up.
Sorry, apologies.
No worries. Don't worry. Any comments on the Treasury management? Okay, so now we'll move on to the adult social care debt management. And I think at this point I will bring in Councillor Free. I think, David, you're presenting the report.
Well, actually, Chair, I thought I'd give myself a little bit of a chance to catch my breath and pass it straight over to Louise, if that's okay, from
Brilliant.
Devon or Partnership, just to do a quick introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Item 9 on page 33 of your reports pack is the final report following our review of adult social care debt management. My understanding that this has been tabled today following questions that arose at the November 24 Audit and Governance Committee. This, as I said before, this is the final internal audit report following our review of adult social care debt management. The scope and objective of that audit was to provide the Council with an opinion on the systems, processes and procedures in place to recover adult social care due to it. The internal audit opinion is that of limited assurance, and that is based on the findings that are set out, summarised on the introduction page of the report, so the key findings are there. Basically, the actual limited assurance that adult social care is not effectively and promptly recovered. The executive summary provides details on which our opinion was based, and detailed findings and recommended action is set out in the Appendix A. This report was issued in draft in October 2024, which gave management and officers an opportunity to consider the contents of the report and to provide their responses and agree a management action plan. And this final report was issued on the 29th of November 2024. You will see on the front page that 11 recommendations were made in total. On the 19th of December 2024, an adult social care debt management meeting was held, at which point, amongst other things, this internal audit debt management report and the management action was discussed. And at that point, 6 of the recommendations have been implemented, so action has been taken, with the remaining 5 having action ongoing at the moment. Those meetings occur monthly, audit is in attendance at those meetings, and management action is tracked as part of our internal audit processes. Audit and Governance Committee will be updated on the progress of those management actions as and when we have those details as part of our regular reporting function.
Thank you, Louise. I'm actually going to take some advice from Democratic Support now before we move to questions, because I am concerned that there's some information in the reports pack that could actually identify individuals. So should we move to a part 2 for this part of the meeting?
Can I just, maybe. So if I explain, this is the report that comes in sort of in its raw, state from Devon Audit Partnership. What would normally come here is sort of a review from management and the recommendations and discussion from you to see if we're going in the right direction. So the timing of this is, I was absolutely aware that sitting here saying verbal update wasn't the best thing to do. So I asked for this report to come through, particularly because Councillor Nicholson was expressing at the last meeting, or meeting before, an interest in our debt and etc. So I've asked for this report to come in. It does name a few clients, and I think my request would be that rather than, I can't ask you not to delve into questions, but if you do, I think we need to go into part 2. But I would just make a plea that possibly, given that we had a board meeting on the 19th of December, so we're still working through those management, goodness me, I'm struggling today, management responses. If I make a pledge that I come back and sit here at the next meeting with an updated report that I can talk to in detail about how we have negated some of, you know, if not all, but most of the red that is coming up on here, that would be probably a better way to go. But if you do wish to question it more, I think we'll have to go into part two.
I've got Mrs Benny and then Councillor Rainsford. Councillor.
I think that's probably a good idea in the sense that what I get from you is a sense that there's been quite a lot of work that's been done and is being done currently. And rather than us spend a lot of time rehashing conversations, if we have an agreed point where we have an update with all the definitive action in one go, it would seem more sensible, and particularly from an assurance point of view, because then we can really get to grips with the outstanding things that then presumably are nutty issues if they haven't been dealt with for a couple of months. Yeah.
So I think what I'm trying to do here is to be open and transparent and show this is how the data arrives. So I hope that's useful. But I think Mrs. Benny, it would certainly help me if we were able to come back, and I will make a personal pledge that I will take responsibility to come back to the next meeting with an update that I would be open for questions. And if I think there are anything that we're dragging our feet on, I'll make sure the relevant officer is in the room as well, so that you can do some more questioning, if that would be helpful.
Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just reiterate and support Mrs Benning's comments? It would be far more productive, I think, to come back and just look at the bits that are still overhanging and needing attention.
Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also echo the sentiments of the two councillors before me. I do have one question. It is a general question, though, if that's okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll back to it. I hate technology.
I think it was page 34, wasn't it, Councillor Freeman?
Yeah. I'm just trying to scroll back to it. It's like, okay, yeah. So general question. So on page 34, it was noted that the income recovery team is due to lose a member of staff during October who cannot be replaced, impacting on the already stretched resource. In addition, the legal team do not currently have capacity to manage all of the debt recovery cases referred to them. So why, there may be a simple answer to this, why can that member of staff who is leaving not be replaced? If the legal team and the income recovery team are already overstretched, are we not able to increase their capacity in order that the debts outstanding to the council can be recovered? I mean, this talked about it being at £8.9 million. That's a lot of money, and it's a lot of future funding for other people as well, potentially. Thank you.
So, Councillor Freeman, one question that turned into two, which is fine. So I think the wording in there is absolutely correct, as was given to Devon Audit Partnership at the time. We were in not an official recruitment freeze, but we were certainly trying to hold our numbers as we navigated our way through the financial year and the issues that we were facing. So the good news, I suppose, and this is where I might be able to answer some of these questions at a further meeting, is in the budget report that was recommended yesterday by Cabinet, there is an increase of 6 FTE into the debt recovery team, in recognition that if you don't chase the debt, it's lost money. So it's almost an investor save. You increase the number and you increase the income. So hopefully that gives you some assurance that actually I do listen occasionally, and I do make some rational decisions. But thank you for spotting that one.
Councillor Cuddihy.
Yeah, just to say I agree with the general consensus that Mrs Benny's come forward. There's only one question I'd like to ask, because obviously this is, again, it's about debt recovery, but there doesn't seem to be any explanation to it. On page 35, reference the ICB. In March 2024, 18 million was being withheld by the Devon ICB due to a separate issue which could potentially affect the council's cash flow position. Can you explain where we are on that and the reasons thereafter, please?
Yeah, of course, Councillor Finn. I don't want to go into too much detail because they are a very strategic partner with us, but timing of it was at the year end, I believe, that a debt overhung into the next financial year for various different reasons that I don't think we need to necessarily air today, other than to give you the assurance that that was quickly settled, and we are now back onto an even foot where we pay our debt to ICB, they pay their debt to us. So it was unfortunate that we undertook, or fortunate, whichever way you look at it, that we asked Devon Audit Partnership to do the review at that particular time, because that came up. If they'd come in sort of 2-3 weeks later, that wouldn't have been an issue, it would have resolved itself. But you're absolutely right to pick that up, Councillor Finn, because it is a material number.
No, thank you for your clarification, too.
Councillor Cudahy.
Thanks. David, just to clarify, that 18 million figure in respect to the Integrated Care Board, that's completely separate to the 8.9 million that's referred to in the report, which is the outstanding debt for adult social care. And I think it's probably fair to say, isn't it? I mean, the council can probably be reasonably confident that a significant proportion of that is going to be paid. Are you familiar with how many deferred payment agreements there might be that are sort of relevant to this figure? For those who don't understand what they are, you know, if somebody needs to go into care and that they have to pay their fees, the council, the government won't pay them on their behalf. You know, they might reach an agreement, you know, to sign over the house, or the house will be sold at, you know, on their death, and that's how the council will recover its debt. But I mean, maybe you can just give us some idea of how much of this is sort of secured debt, if I can use that phrase, and how much isn't.
I think if it's okay, Councillor, if we bring the report back to the next meeting, and then I'll bring the correct officers into the room. Okay. This is, as you can imagine, a very complex area which involves my team from finance, it involves adult social care team working together, strategic partners, as we've discussed. So it's quite a difficult area, but there are policies, there are procedures, and we can certainly lay out what we're doing, what the debt profile looks like, how we're tackling it. So yeah, happy to do that.
I mean, the things that were concerning me is looking at the report, or just a couple of things that sort of stand out that were concerning me. Looking at page 33, the report reads the current outstanding debt from ASC to ASC for client contributions stands at 8.9 million. 53% of this debt relates to invoices raised post April 2023, which I think is about 4.7. But then that leaves 4.2 that's for invoices that have been raised prior to April 2023. And looking at the table, you can go all the way back to 2017, 2018, there's still 200,000 outstanding. 2018, 2019, there's 300,000 outstanding. I mean, I guess you probably know where I'm going here. The longer the debt's outstanding, one imagines the more difficult it is to recover. So I guess I'd like to understand how much of this is likely to be written off. You know, the report's very detailed. It gives a lot of useful information about some of the practical difficulties of recovery. But what doesn't seem to have been audited is what happens in the first place when somebody approaches in need of social care, and they might be subject to a financial assessment, for instance.
So obviously the remit that we gave to Devon Audit Partnership was to look at the debt in particular, but certainly the terms of reference of the board, etc., will come into that. In terms of when I said that we're increasing the resource into the recovery team, I'm looking at this from sort of both ends of the telescope, if that's the right expression. So you've got working this way from I raised an invoice this month that hasn't been paid, back that way, and then asking a team to go back to the other end and work that way with more resource on that one, because as you quite rightly point out, there's more history there and it's more difficult to clear that way. And once we meet in the middle, we can be on a firmer footing, I suppose, going forward.
Yeah,
so.
I'm pleased you're looking at it, because I was a bit concerned that the audit doesn't appear to cover it. So for example, I mean, just to take as a starting point, if someone approaches the council with social care needs and is assessed and their needs are clearly identified, the Care Act is really clear, isn't it? If that person has, I don't know, what is it, £23,500, I think is the cut-off in financial assets. If they've got less than that, they're entitled to free care. If they're above that threshold, they're not. So there is a process of financial assessment, isn't there, of every person who comes forward in need of social care. What I'm a bit concerned about is that this audit talks about how difficult it gets to recover money several months or years down the line. For instance, it talks about deputyship appointments, who's controlling, Mrs. Smith's finances or Mr. Jones's finances. Those are turning out to be very difficult issues to deal with retrospectively. So I'm a bit concerned this doesn't cover that the beginning of that process, that financial assessment, the identification of who's going to manage someone's assets, and what the council are doing to safeguard any debt. Is that something that we can explore at the next meeting as well?
So, if I might try to respond. So, as I said, the remit that we gave to Devon Audit Partnership was to look at that part of the jigsaw.
Yep.
In isolation. I'm quite happy to ask the relevant officers to come in at the next meeting and give both a written and a verbal update on the processes, so that we can all have a clear understanding and give you assurance that I choose my words carefully, I'm not sure what expression I'm looking for, but that there is control at the start of the process.
Yep.
This was a request to Devon Audit Partnership to look at sort of the second part, if you like, because of concerns, as you would imagine from me as a Section 151 officer, that 9 million sounds as if we're starting to lose control. In the scheme of the size of the budget, it's still £9 million, but you know what I mean. But quite happy to come back on that.
Thank you.
Seeing Louise indicating.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of bring your attention to the reason that this report, I understand the report is here today because of questions raised at the November Audit and Governance Committee, and that was in respect of our previous audit into client financial services, which was the financial assessment process, which has recommendations made, and we were tracking that as part of the report.
Okay.
And that came to Audit Committee, from which the questions came about the adult social care debt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Cudley, could you put your mic off, please? Yeah, I think Chris has picked up on a pertinent point. Years ago, we used to have a member of staff in Derriford Hospital. Used to make sure that integrated care assessments were actually carried out before people left, so the care needs were met, and obviously the respective funding streams were set in place then. Was it NHS continuing healthcare, or was it individual, or was it council funding? So there was 3 different avenues. So I think it needs to come before the committee to explain a bit more to where we are, because I was actually reported to me a few weeks ago that somebody actually expressed concerns that people are actually being, because of the crisis that Derriford is under, are being forced out without these assessments. So therefore, who's responsible when they're ditched home? Is it the council? Is it their own financial? Or would it have come under the integrated care assessment programme? So I think for somebody to actually come in and explain to everybody here the different funding form, that's why I brought up about the 18 million, because is that part of the continuing healthcare in line with Derriford? Where's that funding coming from? So we're not sure where that actual funding stream is coming from. So I think it's something that we need to get on top of, and maybe whoever's placed, whatever social worker's placed within the wards, especially with regard to discharge at Derriford Hospital, make sure that the people actually come out with the relevant care assessment, so everybody's clear to who's funding what, why and when. It's just a thought to protect the council as well.
So, thank you, Councillor Finn, for your observations. You have strayed way off my area of expertise, so I will get the right officers in the room and we'll quite happily talk you through the process. Thank you.
Does anyone have any further comments or questions on the adult social care debt management? Okay, we'll move on to item 10. Holly, thank you. Welcome to the Audit and Governance meeting. I believe you're going to be presenting a report on the Procurement Act Readiness Action Plan.
Oh, I was just going to give a quick intro, but it's fine. I can hand over to Holly. She's the expert.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you for having me today. So I just wanted to bring forth a bit of an action plan, so you had a visibility of our sort of progress in terms of being ready for the new Procurement Act. When I came in the summer, when we updated contract standing orders, obviously I mentioned it at the time. At that point in time, it was actually scheduled for October launch of the new Procurement Act. But with obviously the change in government, it was delayed until February the 24th this year. So obviously that doesn't mean that we've just sat and not done anything. We've made sure that obviously we've kept on track in terms of making sure that we're covering everything we need to. For those of you who aren't familiar with procurement regulations, which I imagine many of you might not be, obviously because of the fact that you don't need to be procurement professionals, it is a new act that basically replaces the 2015 regulations, which come about as of us leaving the European Union. So it's sort of the transitional arrangements, and these are sort of the new arrangements that are being put in place. I think in terms of our sort of readiness for this new act, I think the key thing I want to stress is things aren't going to change overnight. So things like contract standing orders, we obviously did a lot of work in the summer. Those are not going to change. So the council's processes and procedures for below threshold activity, that is going to stay the same. Equally, any processes that do fall under the new legislation are going to be facilitated by the procurement professionals in the council. So in terms of that approach, that isn't going to change. I think the other key things to stress is that in terms of the key principles such as transparency, equal treatment, non-discrimination, proportionality, those also remain. They are procurement good practice, and they also reflect the fact that we are still a part of international obligations. So those are still in place, as are mechanisms which many officers use for running procurement, such as framework agreements. So again, those are still in place and they still will be in place. So we will continue to use those as we see fit. And I think the other key thing to sort of mention is that it's not retrospective. So any existing contracts we have and any existing framework arrangements that are out there, we can still use them as is. This is truly all about new procurement activity that falls within the remit of the Act, which is above sort of higher thresholds. In terms of where things are changing then, there are some changes that we will simply be building on our existing good practices. So actually, we've made sure as a procurement profession within the council that we have looked to put in place best practice and good practice wherever possible. So things like the conflict of interest process, that is far more robust under the new regulations, but actually we already had a very competent process in place, and we will be simply building upon that process to make sure it ticks the boxes in terms of the regulations. Similarly, in terms of some of our sort of internal governance processes and around transparency, again, in the summer, we made sure that we made those sort of sign-off procedures around contract amendments and things like that in the summer. Again, we made sure that we put that in there so that actually we could facilitate this transition and get the officers used to these sort of more robust procedures before the new Act came in place. In terms of the main changes then that are sort of, I suppose, completely sort of brand new, there are increasing flexibilities under the new Act. So being able to tailor our procurement process to the very specific needs of the requirement. We think that's going to be a really positive step forward. However, naturally that does come with some new challenges in terms of skills and understanding. So things like increased negotiation is something that we're going to look at, and there is a plan in place in terms of upskilling those that are needed. And I think the main thing I probably want to stress is around the transparency of the new Act. So there are some considerable new requirements, particularly in terms of the publication of notices. So we've actually got 14 mandatory notices now compared to sort of the 4 that we used to have to do. So there is an increased requirement around that. Many of the notices will fall within the existing procedures though, so they will be picked up by the procurement professionals. But I'd probably say the point to mention is that there are significant requirements around contract management, which is obviously something we are going to have to work through. But as I said, those won't be immediately needed because we won't be contract managing until we've ran and issued a new procurement under that process. So that's kind of where we are with those elements. We've taken a systematic approach, so we wanted to make sure obviously that we covered all our bases. So the training, policies, templates, as you'll see in the action plan, we've really made sure that we haven't missed anything. Obviously we are doing a very, like I say, a staged approach, making sure that those who need to know things know it when they need to know it. At the end of the day, procurement processes don't affect every officer in the council, and particularly for the higher value processes, there will be sort of certain key clients within the organisation that we will be working with. But I'm obviously more than open to having any questions that anyone has around the plan. But thank you.
Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update. It's appreciated. One of the reasons for the Act was to increase some flexibility around contracts. And there's a definition of light touch. Who decides and what are the criteria for a light touch contract?
So light touch is actually defined within the regulations. So it's defined within the current regulations and the definition is remaining the same. So basically it's a list of categories generally related to health and social care areas whereby it's been established that actually due to the nature of the procurement activity that you need to run, that actually a standard sort of corporate approach isn't going to work. So the commissioning procurement team, who I work closely alongside, so that's the other side, my procurement service sort of head up the corporate side of things, we do work closely together and we obviously are aligned on this plan together. So they've been running light touch procurement activity as long as my sort of team have been running the corporate side of things. So certainly my understanding is that the light touch remains, and actually all of the original flexibilities that the light touch already enjoyed are remaining as well. So particularly talking about the notices, for example, there's a lot less burden on light touch in order to fill some of these out. So for example, there's a recognition around user choice. So in terms of individuals, obviously if they need care or health needs, that actually their own needs are taken into consideration, and that actually things like that, it wouldn't be appropriate to put things like that in the public domain.
Any other questions? Just a quick welcome to Councillor Nicholson.
I do apologise. I had a personal appointment at the registration office, so I'm sorry that I'm so late, but I'm glad to be here.
No, that's fine. We had the notification earlier, but if there's nothing further on agenda item 10, then thank you, Holly and Liz. And the recommendation is that we note the progress made so far on the delivery of the readiness of the procurement action plan. And then we'll move along to item number 11, which is the committee self-assessment. And Hannah, I think this is yours.
Yeah, Ross apologises he can't be with us today. So following this meeting, I'll send out a reminder email to all members of the committee and all those that have substituted in the last year, as previously agreed. But it's just a reminder to ask committee members to complete the self-assessment ASAP if possible, as Ross will be using the data to put into the annual report, which is due in March. So yeah, it was just a quick verbal update to remind members to complete that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Mrs. Benny?
Yeah, it's just a quick question because it's in my inbox somewhere. Can we make sure with a reminder that we have the terms of reference attached, just so that we can do a comparison, because we'll be asked about whether we're working to those, and it's really helpful to have that on the email at the same time, if that's possible, please. Thank you. It's really good.
No, that is a really good point. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the self-assessment? Okay.
Can I just make a quick point? I think I said this in previous meetings. The irony is that we're here to look at governance, and if we don't fill out these forms that say we are following the governance requirements, so please, a plea from me, it is very helpful and it will help to shape, and it does inform as to whether we're, steering this committee in the right direction. So please put pen to paper for me. Thank you.
Thank you. So, looks like, without wishing to jinx it, we're nearly done. Item 12, tracking decisions. Is committee happy to note the tracking decisions document? Okay, wonderful. And item 13, the work programme. Any comments or questions on this? David first and then Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, the external audit findings report, which is down for March, will come in on the 18th of February, because otherwise it'll be post-backstop date. It'll be slightly redundant at that point. And it's very audity particularly, but where it says Paul Dossett, could that be changed to Jackson Murray? Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the pre-election guidance period, I see it'll go into the next municipal year. Is there no opportunity of bringing that forward? It's just the committee might change, and for a consistency point of view, it'd be useful for the same members to possibly consider that. But if it's not possible, then it'll go into the new municipal year. It was only just that point, Chair. Thanks.
And just while they're deliberating that one, Chair, we will of course add adult social care procedures to the next meeting. Yeah.
But probably, Chair, on that, David did speak to me prior to the meeting. Apologies, David, I've had a few personal issues, so I didn't get a chance to ring you today. But very happy with that, and obviously we can pick up further discussion in due course. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's usually sensible to do the pre-election guidance when there's an election planned, just to take account of any specific issues that are going on at the time.
Well, I think, Chair, there have been a number of issues at every election we've had in recent times. The most recent one being the general election, when officers clamped down on elected members yet further by saying we couldn't allocate any community grant in a general election campaign. So these things are getting more and more onerous, and I think completely over the top. So I think the sooner we bring this before this panel, the better, because I think you'll probably find there's additional work to do, Liz, after you've brought it on for the first time, because I'd like to see some benchmarking with other local authorities, because in the end we might as well just shut down for 2 months prior to election and just have no councillors doing anything.
I mean, obviously the pre-election guidance is based on legislation and government guidance, and is generally the same year on year. But if you want me to bring another paper, I can do that.
I've never seen a paper on CODA, and all I know is that CODA is supplied officers, and generally I don't see any elected members scrutinise the rationale that the monitors officer plays in investigating what can come to us. So the sooner we the better.
Do any other committee members have a view on that?
Through you, Chair. I'm obviously listening to what Councillor Nicholson has said, and just looking at visually the agenda for March. If speaking to David as well, if there was anything from the March meeting we could push on, there is no election this year, so we could hold an additional committee meeting possibly in April, and potentially move a couple of the items from the March with the pre-election period guidance and hold a meeting in April. I don't know if that would be possible.
That sounds like a possible constructive solution. Is committee happy to proceed with that? Yeah, okay. I think we'll go for that if possible. Yeah.
Just in terms of the management of that, if sort of potential dates could be circulated, so in the near future, it'd be quite good for sort of planning purposes. Thanks.
And any other questions or comments on the work programme? Councillor Finn? On something else?
Yeah. Yeah, just to clarify, before we leave, obviously, councillors agreed with regard to the statement to go into the next. Can that all be agreed before it's actually published for the next meeting, the update to the minutes? So everybody's in agreement with it before it actually comes before committee?
So,
And if there's nothing else, I will call Audit and Governance Committee to a close. Thank you all, and see you on the 11th of February. 18th. 18th. It's 11th of March. Thank you.